And when we're talking about budgeting 101, I think the first part that I always try to convey with folks is really just understanding that it is really important to budget. No matter the level of income that you may earn, it's just being able to plan out and being able to ensure that you're not going to hit any rough spots. It's very important to do that, right? So really just understanding your current financial situation is always one of the first spots you should really get to planning when it gets into this budgeting mindset. And we'll start talking more as to how goals can be very helpful as you establish them through time. And then just creating a successful budget. I mean, it's everyone's going to be very different, right? Depending on your current financial situation. But the thing is that if you're able to create something where you're able to achieve it and have those little wins, it can be very, very, very helpful. And how we can roll it out, put it into action, and of course, just managing that budget. And it goes for everybody that's here. Is if you have any questions, please feel free to just interject. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have along the way. So just that first piece of just discovering the importance of budgeting. You hear it a lot from a lot of folks. I hear it a lot from my parents when I was in school. It's always important to budget, Kevin, just make sure you do it. But really just understanding that as we start getting into it more, finances, there really are a huge stress factor for a lot of folks. And especially for adults, as you start getting older, you start realizing certain things that they can be sort of a financial emergency, whether it's something that's medical related, or just an unexpected bill, right? So it's something where you really should be able to plan where your money is going. And really when you have that budget, you have more control. So it creates that opportunity of being able to feel less guilty about doing some minor splurge or having to pay for something. And of course, it's just really being able to become proactive to future life events as well. Because again, if you're able to plan ahead, you're really able to soften that blow when it comes to those kind of unexpected costs. And yeah, just like as we see there below too, it really can prevent a bad situation from getting worse. I'll be sharing my stories with some of the ones that I've had. And we all have our different experiences with it. So yeah, budgeting is very important. So going into that first piece as to why we talked a little bit about as to how it is a huge stress factor for a lot of folks. And sometimes you just have to realize that money can tie into our health in various ways. It's something that we may come to think about from time to time, but I'm hoping this gives you a better perspective with it. So with digestive issues, some folks, when they think about their finances, there's a good chunk of folks that were actually surveyed stating that they actually had a bit of an upset kind of stomach, where they just sort of, when they start thinking about it, it's hurting them. They're feeling something inside. And then with that next part that you'll see is migraines, and it's a little over 40%, closer to 43%. And that's something that can happen when you're thinking about it and just trying to plan out costs. What are you going to be shifting? It can create some headaches, and more so when you're thinking about it too. If you're just dreading the of a upcoming cost, it does create some muscle tension, back pain, and for the folks that were surveyed, it was a little over 60%, which is staggering. But again, it's seeing how it can also affect you emotionally too when it comes into just seeing if you can even afford it. So with depression, it was just a little over 20% when it came to that money health connection. So as you see, it hits different facets of your health. And it's one thing to really keep in mind that if we're able to budget, it can help us out in not being able to have one of these kind of cases happen to us because of our finances. And more so when it comes to our financial health, just being able to understand how we're able to handle our finances. You'll see here that there's 3 columns: financially strong, financially coping, and financially vulnerable. So for folks that said that they were financially strong, they were 29%, excuse me. And essentially what they're saying is that they are able to spend, save, borrow, or plan in a way that will ensure long-term success. So they have quite a bit of confidence in that they're able to be financially healthy and not have to worry about any kind of unexpected emergency, which is good. And then you have another group of folks where it came into that financially coping group. And so that's where they're stating that they're struggling with some aspects of their financial lives, whether that is that they're late to it with a payment or just finding a difficulty with making ends meet. So there's a bit of a larger group for that. And then when we talk about financially vulnerable, that was just close to about 17%. And essentially what they're saying is that they're struggling with all or nearly all parts of their financial lives. So as you see, there's different groupings of folks as to how they're able to handle their finances, with a good chunk of them really being in that middle column there, where they are struggling with some aspects of their financial lives. And so now when it comes to understanding your financial situation, if you're starting off into being able to plan out a budget, it's more than just looking into the numbers, right? It's also asking yourself some questions. And the first one is, are you spending more than you make? Another one is, are you paying yourself last? Meaning that when it comes to receiving your paycheck or your income, are you just putting money in your savings account last, or are you doing that first, right? Because it's really important that you pay yourself. And when we mean by that again is just, are you paying yourself and putting some money, stashing it away into a savings account? When you think, another one is to think about, and that we'll talk about later, is thinking about an emergency fund. Have you thought about one, but have you failed to actually move forward with it? And then, are you spending uncontrollably? Sort of going, and that one sort of ties in with spending more than you make, right? So these are really good questions to really ask yourself as to where you're currently sitting at, and going from there and creating that plan. And so being better than average, here's some more statistics to share with you. So when it came to prepping for a long-term financial plan, with a group of folks that were surveyed, only 30% of folks have actually prepared a long-term financial plan, meaning that they're knowing what they will do when it comes to that retirement age and knowing how they can sort of roll out their plan, whether it's having to diversify some of their portfolio when it comes to their 401k, other aspects related to that. And only 1 in 3 folks are just tracking their spending, which, nowadays it's a little bit easier to track thanks to mobile platforms that we have out there, such as Mint, or even just your online banking app as well. Being able to see transactions that come through, it's another way to be able to track your spending, and it's just a really good habit to keep. And then that part where it's saying not able to afford a $400 unexpected expense. So that is about 47% of folks. Again, that is also quite a large number. And, when we think about a $400 expense, it can be a variety of things, right? So one, it could be that there's just a leaking faucet and all of a sudden a pipe just bursts, especially when it's in the wintertime. Or maybe we're considering that there's some snow on the roof and it's starting to just get heavier and heavier as it begins to accumulate, and then it just creates a little hole. And then of course you have vehicles too. So vehicles, as long as you're doing the proper maintenance on them, you tend to be pretty confident with them. But if you're not really checking it every once in a while, it might have that emergency light, or that light just turn on it and saying, hey, you need a check engine. So really being aware of that. It's, for a lot of folks, they just can't afford those kind of repairs at times. So now getting into this budget, really overall, when you think about a map or just sort of the layout of it, there are really just 3 main parts to it. So that first part that we're going to be talking about is just tracking your spending. And that's really where you're just going to be able to analyze what your purchases are right now, what kind of costs you have, and more. Second is going to be setting financial goals, because one thing that we found to be true, and what I found to be true as well, with my experience, is folks who are able to set financial goals when it comes to creating a budget, they're just more likely to follow through with it and actually take the time and also the patience to just really shift anything that needs to be, whether just cutting some of their expenses that are unnecessary. And then of course, get into that budget, right? So creating that spending plan, also known as a budget. So that first part is really tracking your spending. And really, it's just looking in your income and looking at your expenses, whether it's for a month to a year. What I tend to tell folks is that if you're really starting off in just not really having a budget currently in place, it's nice to just be able to track a whole week. It's because again, within a week, at least for me, I know that I'll at least be paying a bill or two. I'll probably have to fill in some gas. I have a black lab who loves treats, so I know that I'll have to go to a pet shop and buy some treats. But being able to track all those different kinds of spending, really, really important. And again, it's just getting into that habit and just building that small habit because it's such a good one to have. And saving receipts, of recording what you're buying, looking for patterns, and that can be very helpful. When I had my dog, I got him as a puppy, and I didn't realize exactly how much I was spending on treats. Granted, he's a lab and he loves food, so I realized, okay, health wise, it's probably not the best for him, but I love him, so why not? And he was a chunky lab. I loved him. But now that he's a little bit older, now that he's 6, I have to really be aware as to how much he's eating. So now I understand, okay, that pattern has to go away and I'll just buy when necessary. And this is sort of a thing that we like to tell folks is that having a spending diary, it's super helpful to be able to have this because you're able to just track your spending. And usually when you're able to track your spending, you see your behavior when it comes to purchases. And you're able to just look at it actually physically and make those changes. Maybe start realizing, okay, maybe I'm stopping for coffee a little bit too much. I know for myself, when I lived in Portland for a few years, I just bought coffee all the time. There was so many small little local mom and pop shops out there. And then now being back here in Tri-Cities, there's a Roasters, you have Firehouse. There's so many other areas around here for coffee. And I'm just like, okay, I'll treat myself every once in a while, but nowhere like I used to. So really, this information can really just help shape your budget as to how you want to go about it. And now that we've talked a little bit about tracking that spending, now it comes into that important piece of your budget where it's really setting up goals and more importantly, setting up financial goals. Because when you're establishing these, you really want to understand that there's really 3 types of goals out there. You have a short-term goal, which is really what you're going to be doing within the next 6 months. So for this time right now, a lot of folks tend to just do something for their holiday season, right? Because there's a lot of stuff to plan out for that. So gifts, Thanksgiving, a lot of things in that nature. So being able to plan out for that right now, and whether that's maybe just saving $300 for holiday gifts or for something else, it's just that from now until 6 months is typically the range for short term. Then you also got midterm, and with midterm goals, these are going to be ones that are more into 1 to 5 years into the future. So whether that is saving up to have a really nice, fun family vacation, whether that's to save up for a vehicle, things of that nature, where it's maybe it might be 1,000 or more in terms of how much you have to save. That's always something to keep in mind. And then, of course, you have long-term goals. And long-term goals are really the ones that are more than 5 years. Typically, it's looking into more so retirement, possibly even moving into a new home. Because if you're just planning for your own personal self, you have some future life changes that can happen. That can give you a nice little peace of mind. And when we talk about goals, I'm sure you've heard this term before, but SMART goals are always the best to have. And with SMART goals, S really stands for specific, and it's essentially just saying you're going to state what you're actually going to be doing. Action words really help with this, especially when you're thinking about whether it's buying a car, purchasing a home, things of that nature. Next up, you have measurable. And measurable is really just being able to track your progress, really evaluating it, and being able to see where exactly you're in line for achieving that goal. Next up, you have adjustable. So again, it's making sure that you can have an ambitious goal, but also keep it within, making sure essentially that it's just possible to achieve. Because I've met a lot of folks that I've spoken with where they create a financial goal that's smart, but it's in terms of being able to adjust it, they start feeling really embarrassed that they said that they could save up $5,000 in a year, and after the first month, they've only saved up $100. that can really just reduce somebody's confidence with being able to save up money. So for that individual, they decided to just sort of stop and not save. So really understanding that, okay, if you do have a lofty goal, understanding that it's okay to tweak it to making sure that you're able to achieve it is perfectly okay. And it's small steps. You don't want to take huge steps when it comes to budgeting because you have that opportunity where you can just quit and not want to move forward. And of course, making it realistic, and it ties into making sure that it's adjustable. So really understanding that, does it make sense? And are you going to be able to improve your budgeting habits in some capacity too? So whether it's maybe saying that, hey, I am going to be saving at least $500 in the next year, and one way I'm going to do it is by not buying coffee. For me, that is really impossible to do. I mean, I went to a coffee shop this morning because I needed coffee. So really understanding that it is possible and that you're able to tweak certain habits to see that you're able to achieve it. And lastly, it's just time bound or time oriented. And it's essentially just being able to have a start and end date. So when you have those two within a goal, it really helps out. And so SMART financial goal example, it's better to not say, I'm going to save up for a house. Well, that is essentially a goal, right? Saving up for a home. However, if I were to say that within the next 3 years, I plan to save at least $5,000 for a down payment on a home within Tri-Cities, that's a little bit more specific. It's measurable because I'm able to track that every month, right? In things in that realm is something that can be very helpful for folks. Because again, you're wanting to make sure that it's specific. I'm putting a specific amount as to how much I want as a down payment for a home. And of course, some home values and properties do increase or decrease. So when it comes to that, it's being able to just adjust that and ensuring that I'm making sure that down payment is realistic to what that home that I want is super, super helpful. And now just creating that successful budget, we've really talked about tracking what your spending is and making those tweaks and then creating that SMART goal. Now, when it comes to creating that budget, you sort of have that blueprint down now. And when you're creating this blueprint, it's really just looking at all your income sources. And after that, if you can guess what the next one is, I'm sure you can guess it. It's just also determining where your money goes. So seeing also just those expenses essentially, right? And seeing how those expenses are being divvied up. And then of course, after seeing your incomes and expenses, finding that balance between those two and seeing, okay, how much disposable income do I have? What is possible for me to achieve? And ensuring that your budget is making sense and that it does work for you. And of course, lastly, is just managing that system. So really, once you have that nice, well-oiled machine, just keeping it constant and maintaining it and making sure that you're able to tweak it at times. So with that first step, it's just listing all your income sources. So whether it's going to be earned or active income, essentially that is going to be your salaries, any wages, bonuses, tips, and those others that you see listed there. It's really important to write those down and really just take some time, to really list it out. And then second is any kind of investment income. So whether that's coming from interest income, dividends, things of that nature, you want to be able to write those down as well. And then lastly, you have passive income. So if you're someone that's diving more into that real estate world, you might see this type of income a bit more, whether it's real estate income from real estate investments, from certain properties, things of that nature. And for today's purpose, we're really just going to be focusing on just that earned active income because it's very much the most common one that's out there. So just being able to understand that, it's not just looking at your salaries. Maybe you're also doing, you're a delivery person for a Grubhub, right? Or Uber Eats, whatever the case may be. So making sure that you write those down, including the tips that you receive. And then when it comes to determining where your money goes, there's really two big questions you should ask yourself. We talked first about how assessing your current financial situation, and it sort of connects with this. So first off, really just understanding am I spending my money now? Now that you've had an opportunity to track your spending and to see where your sort of pitfalls are per se, what are you going to be able to do differently? How can you spend differently to ensure that you don't get into that? So for me, like I said, I like to buy coffee. So what can I do differently? Maybe it's just buying coffee once a week or twice a week, and just keeping it at that sort of constant versus that of every weekday. And now going into expense categories, we have a whole group of expenses out there, right? So we have those that are essentially the needs. So shelter, whether that is going to be looking into if you have an apartment, or if you're rent, or maybe it's a mortgage. And then of course, looking into your food, clothing, utilities, health. And then you have another group of expenses called your wants. And those are maybe you're saving up for a vacation with family, or maybe you're wanting to buy a boat. Or again, there's also electronics. I know a lot of my friends, when it comes to Black Friday, they tend to start saving up early in the year, and that way they just put some money into it. So once Black Friday deals come out, they're sort of set in that, which is great. It makes me happy because I taught them that. But it's really important to understand that there's that divide between those needs and wants. And then of course you have splurges, which are planned and you don't have to account for every penny. So for me, while I do splurge from time to time, I splurge more so for my pup. So when it comes to buying him a treat, I know that I don't really have to count for the entire cost of it because I sort of have it set aside for him, that money. And then miscellaneous really are just going to be unplanned expenses. And we talked about that, whether it is some type of car repair that needs to be done, or even a home repair or something related to your health. So just understanding that there are 4 groupings when it comes to expenses, and just trying to figure out how can you put this budget into action when it comes to these expenses. And then really now going into that action piece of it, right? How are you now going to implement it? How are you going to roll it out? So really when it comes to this, it's just ensuring that you have to find a balance when it comes to your spending. So if you're in that grouping where with your income, it's leaning a little bit more where you have more income than you do expenses, that's great. That's actually, it's a good spot to be in. And now it's just understanding, okay, now that I know this and I have some debt, are you able to pay off or pay down some of that debt? Or maybe you're just wanting to increase your savings a bit more. Maybe you realize, oh, I don't have that much in my savings and I have some extra income to be able to dip into to put it aside for that. Maybe that's a good spot for you. And of course, really just even redirecting your spending too, ensuring are you able to reach your goal that you put in mind? And maybe it's just, putting more into your savings. That can always be helpful, right? And then there's that other aspect of it too, where you could be maybe more so heavier on the expenses than on income. And that's okay. It does happen. So the first step really with that should be, how can I find ways to just cut back on some of these expenses that I have? Whether it's looking at some type of splurging that you're doing, or maybe it's just some habits, again, with coffee or buying treats for your dog, like me, just finding ways to reduce that. And then of course, having to reduce your reliance on credit. So I like to say that, it's really hard once you start hugging that plastic card because you're relying on it so much. And maybe it's because you just really like the reward system on it, or maybe you're just getting your mileage points on it. I understand that, but at the same time, really trying to reduce the reliance on it. And if you're just doing the minimum payment on it, and you know that you can maybe pay off a little bit more than that, it's probably best to just go that route, right? Just making sure that you pay off your debts. It should be a priority. And just considering ways as to how you can increase your income too. So with this nice pie chart that you see here, it's just a suggested budget guideline. It's not necessarily a thing where if you're currently thinking about your finances right now and you see that, this doesn't look right for me, Kevin, that's okay. It's just a suggestion. But as we'll start off with housing. So housing, ideally you want it to be within 25%. So that's talking about either your rent or your mortgage, renter's insurance included, or your home insurance included there as well. In terms of savings, transportation is going to be talking about the other is 40%. And other really just that disposable income, and whether it's some bills that are set aside, that should probably be the best bet for other. Mainly, it's when you have that plan and you're really excited about it, there can be some leaks there when you roll it out. And again, the first one is always going to be debt, and it's trying to figure out, okay, how can I reduce it? And maybe it's just tackling one debt. The other one is exceeding your phone plan. This is really important because for some folks, they may have that unlimited data plan, but if you ever get a chance, really look into your bill statement and see exactly how many gigabytes are you actually spending. And if you're noticing that you actually spend uh, way little on data because you're always on Wi-Fi, and you see that other packages where it's like it's gigabytes where it can $30 less, it might be something worth considering on that. So just keep that in mind, or maybe it's other side, right? Maybe you have 8 gigabytes, but you're always in your vehicle and you're always having to search something while on the road, wherever you're at, where it doesn't have Wi-Fi. You might want to switch. Really looking into that bill is very, very important. And eating out frequently, it's just the convenience factor for a lot of those services that are out there. Like you have DoorDash, Uber Eats, or even just at home. But it does add up over time. So that leak can really just become a huge, huge leak that you don't really want to get into, right? Ignored repairs, again, just in on your vehicle and ensuring that there are leaks that now. Looking at anything else within your home, and things of that nature, really important to do. And then impulse shopping, you have your coffee stand versus home brew. I've tried to make my own coffee at home, just brewing it, setting the timer to make it start. So that way I don't have to go out and buy coffee. It can be very helpful. And of course, late fees, leftover food that tends to get thrown away from folks, or utilize cable packages. So again, these are just kind of links that are out there that can be resolved. It's just a matter of finding out, okay, if we plan, what can I look at in terms of cost if I were to reduce it or increase it? And how can I fit that into my budget? And examples of just how much you can save, if you have unwanted app subscriptions, maybe you have Netflix, you have Hulu, you have Disney Plus, or you have HBO now, right? There's so many of them. Really looking into how much time are you actually watching their streaming services. Hamilton's on it. And so you only watch it for the purpose of Hamilton and then done watching it. Does it make sense to still hold on to it? Maybe, maybe not, unless you like some of their other Disney movies or shows that are on there. So really taking that into mind. But you can definitely save more than $50 a year on that. Cutting a cable package, this is a hard one for some folks. It's for my dad. I just remember that he always needed cable just because of sports, not because of these other streaming. I try to tell him, hey, Dad, you can actually do that. Or you can just watch me play FIFA on the PlayStation. It's the same thing, right? I'm not great at it, but it's still fun. So he can still save some money on that end there. Or even just renting your internet router too. That's another thing that people tend to forget about. So if you're renting your internet router through your internet service provider, it might just be worthwhile buying one and to just save up the cost down the road. Because yes, it is going to be a higher cost up front there. And you'll be surprised that, hey, it's actually a little easy to set up, because it is. It took me some time because I had to do research with it. I wasn't the best with it, so I needed help. But I'm happy now because everything's all set. When it comes to looking at your various debt that you may be carrying right now. So as you see here, you may have a sort of credit card, also a master credit card, an auto loan, and then a student loan. So how we're seeing this is that paying off the one that has the highest interest rate. So as you see, store credit cards tend to have the higher interest than that of just the Master or Visa. It's really how they earn some of their money. So That being said, as to how this step down is going to work is that it's just paying off that debt. And also it has the smallest amount too, with a balance of 3,500. So that being said, step down is you're paying off the minimum and hopefully you're able to pay off that first one. And when you're able to pay off that first one, for a lot of folks, as you'll see here, it's $80. So for a lot of the folks that I speak with on this, they say, oh, great, that's $80 extra in my pocket. Not necessarily the case. What you want to do is you want to shift those $80 into the next credit card that you have lined up, which is that MasterCard. So now you go from paying just that minimum payment of $120 on it to now $200. So not only are you paying more, but you're also reducing that time frame as to how long is it going to take for you to pay it off. So once you pay off that MasterCard, as we'll see, it goes from $200 to being paid off. And now you go into the auto loan where now you shift it from $220 to $420. And again, it's just essentially a snowball effect where it just accumulates over time and it starts rolling into a very large snowball. So very, very, very helpful. And of course, when you're talking about your budget, understanding that it's just making it work for you and finding some type of budgeting tool. I mentioned myself as to how I like to use my mobile app. I've created a habit within myself where I look into my transactions twice a day. So I tend to look at it in the morning, seeing, okay, was there anything that was processed overnight? And then I check also in the evening, right before I head to bed, just to see, okay, I made a transaction, has it been processed yet? So it's very helpful when you're able to go about that route. But if you don't want to do that mobile app, perfectly fine. There are some other softwares that are out there, like Mint too, or also just going through a regular kind of checkbook and just checking your balance. And then communication with your support system. This is huge. It's one thing that I noticed with my parents that as I got into the financial world and the credit union world, really, I realized that, okay, they don't really do that well when it comes to communication with this. So I had to tell them that, okay, look, guys, on a Sunday, for just a half hour of your time, we're going to be talking about our budget. And so my dad wasn't happy because at that time it was not only football season, but there's also soccer at the same time. So it's just the best of both worlds for him. I can't say that that's the case for him right now, so that's all right. But for him, I said, look, it's just a half hour on a Sunday. You're not working, you're fine. All we're going to do is just talk about what expenses are we expecting for this week? What was paid off last week? What can we expect in the following week? Also, what other things do we have to keep in mind? Is there a repair that needs to be done? Is there something that we need to buy for groceries? Things of that nature. So really having that support system can be very helpful because now they do it on their own. I don't really have to tell them that because they realize, okay, it's Sunday, it's 1 p.m. We're not doing anything. We already ate food. We can go into this now in a nice fashion. And I do it with my friends too, especially during Black Friday. We try to save up, like I mentioned. They save up quite a bit, and I do too. And so we always try to find the better deal when it comes to electronic. So we try to outshine one another with that. And it can be pretty nice because at first I thought that they wouldn't like to budget. And then I realized, oh, we actually like budgeting and we'll just share little deals that are all online. It's been great. And then finding that extra motivation. Again, just understanding that, hey, we talked about it early on, just that financial and that health connection, you'll realize that you're feeling a little bit more calm. You begin to de-stress a bit more when you're able to have a budget and you're following through with just checking your balance. Again, it's being at peace at mind and also just having that communication with your support system. It can go a long way with being able to follow through with a budget. And now managing your budget. We talked a little bit about it. So just continue to track your expenses. And like I mentioned, I monitor my accounts twice a day, once in the morning, once at night. It doesn't take too long. It's just a minute or two, really. Maybe it's longer if my Face ID is not working, so I actually have to get up from bed and see it. But again, it just takes a couple minutes of your time to look at and scroll through transactions. So understanding that is very important when it comes to managing your budget, because again, you're wanting to track your expenses that come through. Also, just for fraud reasons too. You want to ensure that there's no fraud that's coming in, right? And then reviewing your budget. So just always reviewing that goal that you have set and understanding if it can be, does it need to be changed? Or maybe there's something that has occurred where now you have to sort of alter it a little bit and tweak it. And of course, ensuring that the tools are still working for you. You know, one of the things that I've like to do too, on top of just looking at my accounts online, I have a notebook and I just write down my big costs that I essentially have every month. So I always put in like July 2020 bills, and I just sort of label everything. So not only am I following through with, if I pay a bill, I'll just say it's Verizon bill, the amount, the due date, and I'll mark it that it's been paid. And I just keep it in a secure location as well, because I don't like having all my financial documents spread around. I like to have it all in one place, because it's just one of the things that I need to have when it comes to managing my budget. But really ensuring that that is still working for me, and it has been for the past 5 years now. Wow. So it's one of those things that I've really adopted early on, and I've noticed that it's working really well for me. And one of the things that I started doing differently was just actually monitoring my accounts online. Because then I've come to learn that, okay, if I'm paying a credit card bill, if I paid the whole amount, how long does that take to process? And it might be more than one day, right? And for students, even like myself, for example, with like student loans, it does take a couple days to see that reflective on your account. So understanding that all bills process differently, it's why it's super helpful to monitor your accounts for that. And again, lastly, just fine tuning it and adjusting your budget when necessary. And pitfalls that could derail your budget, whether I talked about it, whether it's household repairs, vacations, or unexpected trips for family emergencies of that nature, medical emergencies, holidays, emergency repairs, all different things. We never know what life is going to hit us with. And sometimes it's really helpful when you're able to just have some money set aside. So again, I'm not saying that this is going to happen to you, but really there is that what if scenario, right? So if one of these were to happen to you, do you have money set aside? That's not my phone screen. I'll tell you that this one's my phone screen. So haven't dropped it just yet. And it's got a nice case on it. So I hope it doesn't get damaged like that. Bucket your money. So with this, when we talk about bucket your money, it's really creating more than just one account, especially when it comes to savings accounts. You're actually able to have more than one. And so for my family, I've told them, hey, guys, we try to have some money set aside to just give to our family that lives in Mexico, for example. So we'll all pitch in certain amounts and just put it in there. So when it comes to every quarter that we tend to give them some money, we'll just have that money already set there and it just goes. So we just label it family. I have one where it's animal care for my dog. His name is Rio. So I have one account that's just labeled as Rio. And I've been putting money, been setting aside money for him because while he is a lab, he should be smart. He's ran into a metal pole and I had to do a medical emergency where we had an extracted tooth out of him. So I just say that, yeah, he may look a little weird, but it gives him character. So that being said, I just always have some money set aside for him just because I want to ensure that he's doing okay. And if I need to do any kind of medical emergency for him, that I can have a cushion with that, right? And of course, this is separate from an emergency fund. These are going to be things where you know that you're going to want to be doing. So whether it's for your pet, whether it's for loved ones, or whether it's even for a bill, it's nice to have this set on the side. And of course, emergency funds are really great to have. Very, very helpful. First off, it removes the need for credit. So you're being able to rely on that one credit card where you're calling it your emergency fund, it reduces the need for that. And that's very, very helpful because you don't want to have a high balance on a credit card because of interest and everything else that can affect you with that, right? So it is very helpful for that. And the other part too is that it just helps keep your budget on track. And so while, yes, it is just a small little bump on the road, you're able to maneuver around it and get back on the road with not having to drift around and swerve around. Plus, if it's on a savings account, there can be interest earned on that balance, and that can be very, very helpful too, because it may be just a small amount, but the thing is, it's still earning interest. Um, and yeah, it's just very, very helpful when you have an emergency fund. Uh, I had one set aside for my vehicle when I lived in Portland. It was 2017, and that's when I think Tri Cities also had it too. This huge snowpocalypse. Over there, we were expected to just only get 4 inches of snow one night, and overnight we got close to about 10 inches. And uh, while people know how to drive here in Tri Cities, that's not really the case where I lived out there in Portland area. So I saw a lot of accidents, and it just made me wonder. I'm like, I wonder how many folks have an emergency fund set aside for these kind of situations. So really understanding that it can be very helpful because you never know what can happen. Yeah, very, very helpful if you can do that. And it's always, I'll just say real quick on this, that when it comes to an emergency fund, if you haven't started, it's okay to start with just creating a small amount. It doesn't have to be immediately $2,000. Doesn't have to be 1,000. Just starting off a little bit smaller. Maybe just for saying that within 6 months, I just want to at least have 100 in there. That's okay. You want to take those small steps, and it's a nice little win because you're able to achieve it, and then you're able to increase it. So maybe you're saying, okay, I was able to save 100 pretty quick. What if I bump it up to 250? Challenging yourself is great, but again, and ensuring that it can be a realistic goal to achieve, that's where you want to really put that focus in. And then these are just some additional resources. You can always check out our Learn tab on our website. We have a lot more resources there. We have our blog as well, My Life, My Money blog, where we talk on different topics outside of budgeting also, just how-to ideas, for whether it's planning, also security, if you're doing payments online, things of that nature. And then, of course, reducing unwanted credit card solicitations. If you do receive those, there is a way to opt out of them. And if you do have those cards that come to you via mail, ensuring that you shred it because you don't want to get any kind of fraud or identity theft to happen, right? So yeah, these are just a few resources. And that is all I have for you guys. It's a lot of content, I know, but I hope that you found it really helpful, and I'm happy to answer any questions if anyone may have any. Thank you.